They didn't cry. They didn't scream. They just stood there, boots caked in dust, hands clenched at their sides, looking down at the man who'd raised them. Then the oldest turned to the rancher, voice steady as flint. "Can you teach us to shoot?" The buzzards hadn't even begun circling yet. Maybe they knew better. Maybe even scavengers gave a wide berth to a scene like that. Too fresh, too wrong. The man's body lay half in shadow, one boot knocked off in the scuffle, his belt twisted like he'd been fighting to the last breath. His rifle was still slung useless on his shoulder. 3 kids stood over him, all of them with the same look in their eyes, like someone had reached inside their chests and torn something loose that'd never grow back. The rancher rode up slow, reins loose in one hand, hat low over his brow. His name was Silas Vane. He'd been heading to town with a mule in tow when he caught sight of the smoke, a thin, nervous thread twisting above the hills like it didn't want to be noticed. He almost kept riding. Lord knew he'd ignored worse. But the wind shifted and something in his gut pulled him sideways. That's when he found them. The cabin was half burned, smoke still curling from what used to be a porch roof. The barn door had been kicked clean off. No livestock, no wagon. Just 3 kids and their dead father in the dirt. The eldest, a boy maybe 13, turned first. His shirt was torn at the collar, his lips split, but his voice came out steady. "You Silas Vane?" Silas nodded once, reins creaking in his grip. "Pa said you used to be a gunslinger." Silas didn't answer. The boy kept going. "Said you rode with the Cochran brothers. Said you left after what happened in Abilene." Silas's jaw ticked, but still he didn't speak. The boy gestured to the body. "This was our pa, name's Henry. That's June." He nodded toward the girl, maybe 10, freckles and fire in her eyes. "And that's Elias, a little boy, no more than 6, cheeks streaked with ash and dirt, clutching something tight in his hand." Silas dismounted, slow. His boots hit the earth like he'd been carrying 100 pounds of regret. "What happened here?" Henry didn't flinch. "They came last night. Said pa owed them." "He didn't." "Who?" "Didn't say names. Wore black coats. One had a scar like rope across his neck." Silas stiffened. He knew that scar. Henry stepped closer. "We buried Ma 2 winters back. It's just us now." Silas looked at the boy, at the girl staring daggers into the earth, at the little one who hadn't spoken a word. He opened his mouth to say something. What? He didn't know, but Henry beat him to it. "Can you teach us to shoot?" It landed like a stone tossed into still water. No, Henry's eyes didn't flicker. "Why not?" Silas swallowed. "Because once you start down that road, it don't end where you think it does." "Maybe not," Henry said, "but it ends where they do. That's enough." Silas stared at the boy and saw something he recognized too well. Not rage, not grief, purpose. That's what scared him most. He looked at the burned-out cabin, at the body cooling in the dirt, and then at the horizon. He knew what came next if he walked away. They'd try on their own. Sloppy, reckless, dead before they reached the next town line. He sighed. "Get your things. What you got left?" They didn't cheer, didn't smile. They just moved, quiet, practiced. June grabbed a threadbare satchel. Elias clutched the pistol their father never used. Henry slung the old rifle over his shoulder. They were outlaws already and didn't even know it. They rode double on Silas's mule, left the grave unmarked. Silas didn't ask what they wanted revenge for. He knew it wasn't just about a dead man. It was about being made helpless, about having something taken in the middle of the night that no law would give back. They made camp by the river's bend. Silas watched them from across the fire. June gutted a rabbit like she'd done it 100 times. Henry sharpened a stick into a spear. Elias fell asleep, gripping the pistol like it was a teddy bear. Silas said nothing for a long while, just stared into the flames. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft and bitter. "I'll teach you, but not how to kill. I'll teach you how not to die. There's a difference." Henry nodded. "That'll do." And so it began. Mornings were for drills. Loading, unloading, cleaning. How to unjam a rifle without blowing your hand off. How to make a bullet count when you only got one. June picked it up fast. She had a mind for angles. Henry was slower, but deliberate. He didn't rush. Elias could barely lift the pistol without it dragging in the dirt, but he mimicked every move Silas made with a quiet focus that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Afternoons were for riding, tracking, laying low. Silas taught them how to find water in dry hills, how to read sign, how to know when they were being followed. "What if we get caught?" June asked once. "Don't," Silas said. Nights brought stories. Henry asked about Abilene. Silas never answered straight. Just said, "That's where I stopped being proud of the man I was." Days passed, then weeks. Word started drifting in from nearby towns. A gang hitting homesteads, always at night, always leaving a mark carved into the doors, a noose with 3 loops. Silas went still when he heard. He'd seen that mark before. One night, June stood by the fire, knife in hand, wiping blood from the blade. "I ain't afraid of them." "You should be," Silas said. "Fear's what keeps you sharp." Henry paced nearby, eyes on the stars. "We need to go after them." "Not yet. When you can shoot straighter than me." That became the new rule. Every morning, a contest. Targets set in trees. Stones on stumps. Whoever beat, Silas picked the next move. For weeks, he never lost. Until the day Henry did. The boy breathed slow, took aim, and split the not dead center. Silas raised an eyebrow, lowered his own rifle. "Your move," he said. Henry looked west. "We ride." They found the trail easy. The men weren't careful, overconfident, used to terror, used to silence. They weren't silent now. The first outpost was empty, burned to the ground. Signs of struggle, blood in the dirt. Nobodious. June touched the noose symbol carved into a support beam. "They're close." Silas's jaw tightened. Too close. That night, Elias screamed in his sleep. Woke choking, hands clawing for the pistol. Silas held him until the panic passed. "Was he there?" Silas asked. Elias nodded. He smiled when he shot Pa. Silas didn't sleep that night. The next morning, they spotted the smoke. A camp. 3 men. Black coats. One with a scar like a noose around his throat. Henry didn't ask for permission. Silas didn't give it. They moved together. 3 children, a rancher with a past, and more fury than bullets. But nothing ever goes to plan. The camp was a trap. They'd been seen. Gunfire exploded before they reached the first tree. Silas shoved Elias down, dragged June behind a boulder, shouted for Henry, but Henry wasn't there. He'd already moved ahead. Too far, too fast, and the man with the scar turned, grinning. Rifle raised, taking aim. Silas's shout split the trees, but it was too late. Henry was already standing in the clearing, feet planted like roots in the dirt, rifle braced against his shoulder. The scar man took aim. Time buckled. A hawk screamed overhead, and then came the shot. Not from the scar man. From Henry. The boy fired first. The recoil shoved him back, but his aim held. The scarred man staggered, spun, collapsed with a sound that was less a cry and more a grunt torn from the gut. Blood soaked the dirt beneath him in seconds, thick and fast. The other 2 men scrambled, confused, returning fire in bursts that shattered branches and punched holes in the air, but Henry was already diving, rolling behind a stump slick with moss. Silas rose from cover in the same instant, barking a warning as June flanked wide to the right, her knife already drawn though it would have done little against bullets. Elias stayed low, just as he'd been taught, crawling toward the saddlebag with the extra cartridges. Silas moved like a ghost, like the old days when his name still meant something, when men flinched just hearing it. His first shot caught one man in the thigh, sending him tumbling into the coals of their fire, screaming. The second didn't scream. He just dropped. A clean shot through the throat, neat as a stitch. And then it was quiet. Too quiet. Silas crept forward. Henry rose slowly, shaking but alive. The man with the scar was still breathing, barely. His hand twitched beside him, fingers creeping toward the knife on his belt. Silas stepped on it. "Don't," he said. The man's eyes, pale and mean, stared up. "Ain't your fight vain?" he rasped. "You made it mine." Silas knelt, grabbed the front of the man's coat, and pulled him up just enough to see Henry over his shoulder. "He's the one you need to talk to." Henry stood there, breathing hard. He looked smaller now, like the weight of what he'd just done was catching up to him 1 inch at a time. Silas didn't say anything. Neither did June or Elias. The fire crackled and spat beside the man dying in the dirt. "You killed our father," Henry said. "Why?" The man's lips cracked open, blood seeping between his teeth. "Didn't know it was you kids in there," he coughed. "Just a name on a list." "What list?" Silas asked, but the man only laughed. It turned into a wet gurgle, and then he went still. Henry didn't move. Not for a long time. Later, when the sun had fallen behind the hills, and they'd cleaned their weapons and dug 3 shallow graves, Silas found Henry sitting by the fire, the rifle across his knees, staring into nothing. "First time's the hardest," Silas said. Henry didn't look up. "Will it ever feel like enough?" Silas hesitated. No, there was no sleep that night. The kids lay curled close together, but their eyes stayed open. Silas stood watch. Something had shifted. The road ahead had always been dark, but now it felt narrower too, like one wrong step could drop them all into something deeper than death. Come morning, they headed south. The trail led them into dry country, past settlements so small they didn't show up on maps. At every stop, they asked the same questions. "You seen men in black coats? You seen this mark?" And showed the carving, a noose with 3 loops. Most folk went quiet. A few muttered and turned away. One old man spat at the sight. "Best you leave that trouble alone," he said. "They ain't just outlaws. They're collectors." "Of what?" Silas asked. "Debts. Souls. Don't matter. They come tonight. Always leave something burning." He wouldn't say more. 3 towns later, they caught another trail. A trader had seen a group riding west, fast, dragging something behind a mule. Left blood for miles. The kids didn't blink. They just tightened their packs and kept riding. One evening, while setting camp near a dry creek, Elias wandered off. June panicked first. Silas and Henry spread out fast. They found him 10 minutes later, crouched behind a boulder, watching something. A woman, bound. Half conscious. Drag marks in the dirt behind her. They got her loose quick. She'd been whipped, her face bruised and swollen, lips cracked. She could barely speak, but she tried. "They killed my brother. Took his boy." She clutched at Silas's sleeve. "So they be back." "Who?" Silas asked. She tried to answer, but passed out instead. They made a litter and carried her to the nearest cabin, a half-day's ride north. It belonged to a widow who didn't ask questions. The kind of woman who'd seen too much to need the details. She gave the kids stew and the woman a place to rest. That night, Silas sat outside, staring at the moon through the branches of a twisted oak. Henry joined him. "She had a brother," the boy said, "and a nephew." Silas nodded. "They gonna be next?" "Already were." Henry's fists clenched. "Why did they do it?" "These men." Silas was quiet a long time. "Because nobody stopped them when it would have mattered. And now it's too late for most to try. But not us." Silas met his eyes. "That's what scares me." They rode out again the next morning, leaving the woman in the widow's care. The air was getting hotter. The sky turned a copper shade that made every shadow look longer, more dangerous. The trail turned south again, and then they reached Eden Hollow. It wasn't a town, just a trading post with a name too big for its boots. One saloon, one blacksmith, and a sheriff who hadn't lifted his head when Silas walked in with 3 kids behind him. "Need information," Silas said. "Most do. Men in black coats. One of them had a scar. They traveled through here." The sheriff leaned back in his chair, boots creaking. "Maybe." Henry stepped forward. "They killed our father." The sheriff's eyes flicked to the boy, then to June, then Elias. Something in his jaw twitched. "They passed through. Week ago. Where they go?" The sheriff hesitated. "There's a place called Dead Horse Ridge. Folks say it's cursed. They've holed up there before. Burned down the last church that tried to stake a claim." Silas frowned. "How many?" "Too many. You riding alone. You ain't coming back." Henry turned to Silas. "We have to." June nodded. "We're not turning back now." Silas looked at all 3 of them, at the fire burning behind their eyes. They weren't kids anymore. Not really. He didn't know if they'd ever been. "We make a plan," he said. "We hit them fast. Quiet. No speeches. No mistakes." They left Eden Hollow under cover of night, the stars their only witnesses. Dead Horse Ridge was a scar in the land, jagged and mean. The cliffs jutted up like broken teeth. Smoke drifted from a cave mouth at the top. They camped in the gulch below, just out of sight. Silas mapped the terrain in silence. 2 paths in. Both watched. If we draw 'em out, we can split them, Henry said. June unsheathed her knife. We cut off the exits. Silas nodded. And if anything goes wrong, we finish what we started, Henry said. They moved before dawn. But nothing ever goes to plan. Elias was the first to see them, men riding back early. 4 of them. Too soon. They had to move. Now. Silas gave one look and the signal. The kids scattered into position. The sun rose like a blade over the ridge. Then the shooting started. The shot cracked like the earth splitting. Henry hit the ground and rolled into cover as a bullet struck the stone just above where his head had been. Elias lay flat, eyes wide, heart hammering. June had already vanished into the trees, her steps quick and silent, like she'd rehearsed this moment in 100 dreams. But Silas didn't flinch. He stood in the open, revolver drawn, jaw tight. He fired twice. One rider dropped. Another veered off, clutching his shoulder, screaming. The others dismounted and vanished behind rocks, returning fire in blind bursts. This wasn't the ambush Silas had planned. They'd come too early, and the enemy too many. Henry scrambled to reload, his hands slick with sweat. One shell slipped from his fingers. He cursed under his breath, jammed it back into the chamber, and peered over the ledge. A figure in black darted between cover, closing distance. Silas spotted him too late. The man lunged, blade flashing. Henry didn't think. He fired. The kick nearly broke his wrist, but the bullet hit its mark, chest high left. The man went down hard, but others followed. June was already behind the outermost shooter. She lunged from the brush, knife catching sunlight, and slit his throat clean before he could turn. Blood sprayed her shirt. She didn't stop. She kept moving, ducking, sprinting to cover, as another rifleman shouted in alarm and pivoted toward her. But Elias, trembling and pale, stood and fired his pistol for the first time. The shot went wide, but it made the man flinch. June didn't miss her chance. One slash. The man collapsed. Then silence again. Silas turned, counting bodies. 5. All dead or dying. He looked to the ridge, the cave mouth above. Smoke still drifted, lazy and unbothered. That wasn't the main group, he said. Henry nodded. Scouts, which means they know we're coming. June wiped the blade on her sleeve. Then we go now. No, Silas's voice was hard. Not like this. We fall back. But they'll run. They won't, Silas said. They'll hunker down. We make them think we retreated, then strike when they're fat and lazy. But I said no. Henry bit back his protest, jaw clenching. He looked at the corpses scattered around the gulch. They weren't like the man who'd killed their father. They were younger, barely out of their teens. One had a string of beads in his pocket. Another had a crude sketch folded in his coat. A little girl drawn in charcoal. A daughter, maybe. A sister. Why would boys join men like that? Henry asked. Silas picked up the drawing, studied it in silence. Sometimes the world don't give you choices. Only chains. They buried the dead in silence, same as they had before, then vanished into the pines before the sun was too high to hide them. They spent 2 days circling Dead Horse Ridge, watching from a distance, learning the rhythm. There were 12 men inside, maybe more. Silas noted when the camp ate, when the lookouts rotated, when the laughter echoed from deep inside the cave. The children trained in between, target practice, knife drills, signaling. But something had changed. Henry moved differently now. Quieter, more controlled, but colder too. June didn't smile anymore. Elias barely spoke. At night, he whispered things in his sleep. Names, prayers, apologies. And Silas. Silas watched them and wondered how much longer before they stopped being children altogether. On the 3rd night, a man stumbled out of the ridge, alone, coughing and drunk. He barely made it 100 yards before collapsing against a boulder to relieve himself. June and Henry were on him in seconds. They tied him fast, dragged him to a hollow away from camp. When the man woke, Silas knelt beside him. "You going to tell us everything?" he said. The man laughed, a wheezing sound that turned into a cough. "Ain't afraid of you. You should be." Henry stepped forward, calm and quiet, and put the barrel of his revolver against the man's kneecap. "You killed our father," he said. "Start talking." That broke something in the man. He wasn't brave, just drunk and stupid. The words spilled quick after that. The noose mark belonged to a man named Corvin. Not his real name, just what folks whispered. He'd come from somewhere east. Badlands, maybe even further. Started with 5 men. Built something mean out of nothing. Now he ran with 30, sometimes more. Killers, burners, slavers. They'd killed men for a pair of boots, women for looking too long. But there was method too. Corvin wanted debt. Leverage. A reason folks couldn't say no. Towns that owed him would protect him. Deny he existed. Or kill for him. "You ain't gonna stop him," the man said. "You ain't got the numbers. Ain't got the cruelty." Henry shot him. Just once. Silas stared, unblinking. He talked. He was gonna warn them, Henry said. Soon as we let him go. He wasn't leaving. Then he didn't matter. The words hit harder than any bullet. Not because they were wrong, but because they weren't. They buried that man too. Marked nothing. The next morning, Silas drew the final plan in the dirt. "We hit from both sides. June takes the left ridge, cuts the signal. Henry and I go right. Elias, you stay back. You're our anchor. If it goes wrong, you run. Find help." "I'm not running," Elias said. "Not asking. I'm still not running." Silas stared at him. Elias held his gaze. And Silas finally nodded. The final hour crept by like a dying man. The wind picked up. Clouds rolled thick overhead. It felt like the land knew what was coming. Then came the scream. June had slit the throat of the lookout and tossed a torch into their supply crates. The fire jumped fast. Chaos followed. Silas and Henry moved through smoke and shadows, guns ready, picking targets with brutal precision. The men inside scattered, some grabbing weapons, others confused. Elias loosed 2 shots from above, breaking lanterns and casting everything in deeper dark. Screams rang off the canyon walls. Then Corvin stepped out of the cave. He didn't look like a monster. He was average in every way, height, build, voice. But his eyes were wrong. Not angry, not cruel, just empty, like everything behind them had burned down years ago. He saw Silas and smiled. "Vain," he said. "Didn't think you had it in you." Silas raised his gun. "This ends now." "You think so? I've got men coming. You've got kids. This ends with you dead. I've died before." Corvin drew. Both men fired. Silas dropped. Henry screamed. June tackled Corvin before he could fire again. The two hit the dirt, grappling, her knife flashing, his gun clattering away. Henry ran to Silas. Blood pooled fast. Too fast. "Don't." Silas gritted his teeth, trying to sit. "Finish it. Let go." Henry turned. Corvin had June by the throat, slamming her against the stone wall. She was choking. The knife lay feet away. Corvin raised his fist. Then Elias fired. The shot struck Corvin's leg. He roared. June dropped, grabbed the knife, and drove it deep into his side. Corvin's breath left him in a shudder. He stumbled, tried to speak, but nothing came. Just blood. He fell. It was over. Or so they thought. Because when Henry turned back to Silas, the old rancher wasn't breathing. The silence after was not peace. It was void. It was the echo of everything they couldn't stop from unraveling. Elias dropped down beside Silas, trembling, fingers searching for a pulse he couldn't find. June stood frozen, hands bloodied, mouth open as if waiting for breath that wouldn't come. Henry knelt beside the body and touched Silas's shoulder, but the man was already cooling beneath his palm. "I told him we shouldn't," Henry said softly. Not with anger, not even regret. Just the weight of the moment collapsing into his chest. June wiped her face with a shaking hand. He knew he was going to die. The way he looked at us this morning, he knew. No, Elias's voice was sharp. He didn't give up. He wasn't supposed to die, Henry whispered. Not him, not after everything. But death wasn't a fair dealer. It came when it wanted and took what it pleased. They buried Silas beneath the ridge before dawn. June carved his name into a flat stone with her knife, tracing each letter slowly, then stabbing it once through the center. Elias cried, not the loud, desperate cries of a boy, but the hollow, trembling sobs of someone who had tried so hard to stay brave for too long. Henry just stood at the edge of the grave, fists clenched, not saying a word. When they returned to the cave, the fire had burned low. The surviving men from Corvin's gang had either fled or surrendered, their hands high, their faces pale. There were 4 in total, all of them young, confused, and quiet. June eyed them like wolves, her blade never more than inches from reach. Henry wanted to execute them where they stood, but Elias stopped him. They're not the ones who killed Pa, he said. They're not the ones Silas came here to end. But they were part of it, Henry said. So are we now? What does that make us? Henry turned away. They locked the men in the cave's storage room. One tried to escape. June broke his arm. No one tried again. Over the next day, they sorted through the remnants of the gang's camp. Letters, stolen goods, weapons. A ledger with names, dozens of them. Towns, debt tallies, codes. June stared at the list for hours, tracing each name like it was a gravestone. They weren't just raiders, she said. They were building something, leveraging people. Henry nodded. He wanted more than to rob. He wanted power. Then this ain't over. The statement hung in the air. Elias looked from one sibling to the other, voice shaking. We're not really thinking about continuing, are we? We have to, June said. No, we don't. Silas is dead. Pa's gone. We've done enough. There are more out there. That's not our fight. June stepped toward him, eyes sharp. If we stop, they come back. To our town. To others. It won't end just because we want it to. You don't know that. Edo. Elias turned to Henry, desperate. Tell her. Henry didn't speak. You're with her? Elias said. Henry looked down at the dirt, the broken bodies, the blood that refused to wash from his skin. I don't know what I'm with, but I know I can't go back. Not yet. Then I'll go, Elias said. No, June replied. You can't stop me. Yes, I can. The words hit hard. Not with threat, but with sorrow. The kind of sorrow that comes when you realize even family can fracture under the weight of purpose. That night, Elias packed what he could. June said nothing. Henry didn't look up. At the edge of the trees, Elias paused, looking back only once. You think you're doing this for Pa, he said. But he wouldn't have wanted this. He wanted to keep us safe, not turn us into killers. June didn't reply. Elias disappeared into the dark. Days passed. The camp grew quieter. The prisoners remained locked, fed but watched. Henry found a map among Corvin's things. It marked routes, trails, hideouts, towns with circles around them. The same ones in the ledger. One in particular had 3 red XS drawn beside it. Tool Bend. That's where they were heading next, Henry said. June nodded. Then so are we. But we can't just ride in, Henry said. We don't know who's tied up in this. June tilted her head. Then we flushed them out. The next morning, they rode into Tool Bend. It was a dusty little town with too many eyes and too few smiles. People watched them from porches, windows, alleys. Henry felt it instantly. This town was afraid. Or worse, loyal to something they didn't speak of. They stabled the horses and checked into the only inn. The innkeeper, a wiry woman with hollow cheeks, handed them keys without a word, eyes darting nervously. June waited until they were alone before she spoke. This place reeks of silence, she said. They know something. Maybe they're in on it, Henry said. Or maybe they're trapped. They didn't have to wait long for confirmation. That night, someone tried to enter their room. June was ready. She caught the man's arm as he picked the lock, dragged him in, and slammed him against the wall. He was young, again, not much older than Henry. Dirty face, twitchy eyes, hands shaking. Please, he whispered, don't kill me. I was just supposed to check if you were alone. Who sent you? June hissed. I don't know his name. He's new. Took over after Corvin died. Word travels fast. Where is he? Basement. Old saloon. Calls it the news seat. Says he's carrying Corvin's torch. Henry pressed the barrel of his gun to the boy's forehead. If you're lying, I'm not. Please. They tied him and gagged him. left him with the horses. Then they went to the saloon. The building was quiet, mostly empty. An old piano sat silent in the corner. Dust coated the tables, but the trapdoor behind the bar had fresh prints around it. June knelt and opened it slow. Voices echoed below. They descended into the dark, careful, silent. At the bottom, they saw the truth. It wasn't just one man. It was 6, 2 armed, one behind a desk, giving orders. Ledger in hand, brand new boots, silver spurs. He spoke with ease, with charm. And behind him, painted in white on the wall, was the same symbol they'd seen on Corvin's map. A hand holding scales broken. He said to burn their farm. The man at the desk said, "Not the whole town. You got sloppy." "I didn't mean to," a man muttered. "You mean you enjoyed it?" Laughter. Henry stepped out into the open. "Then you'll enjoy this too." The laughter died. The man behind the desk rose calm. "Who the hell are you?" June stepped beside her brother. Judgment. The gunfire was fast, brutal. Henry dropped the closest 2 before they could blink. June threw a knife into another's throat, then grabbed a pistol from the floor and fired point-blank into a 4th. The man behind the desk fled, down a side tunnel. Henry chased. June followed. The tunnel twisted, narrow, and choking with smoke. The man ran like the devil, was at his heels. Henry caught him just as the tunnel ended at a drop-off. A mine shaft long abandoned. The man turned, breathless, gun raised. "You don't know what you're doing," Henry fired. The man screamed as the shot struck his leg. He dropped his weapon and fell to the ground, groaning. "You can't kill this," he spat. "It's bigger than me, bigger than Corvin. It's a network. You cut off one head, another grows back." Henry stepped closer. June appeared at his side. "Then we keep cutting," she said. The man laughed, delirious. "You'll be hunted. You'll die in a ditch." "Maybe," Henry said, "but not before you." He raised the gun again, but this time June stopped him. "Let him talk," she said. "Let him tell us everything." The man smiled, teeth red. "You won't like what you find." "Doesn't matter," June said. "You're too late," he whispered. "It's already begun." They tied him up and dragged him from the mine, through the tunnels slick with dust and blood. He limped and spat, muttering threats that came out more like prayers. The whole town had gone quiet by the time June and Henry emerged from the saloon. The bound man slung between them like a prize carcass. No one dared stop them. The townsfolk stood frozen in doorways and windows, watching with the kind of look people wear when they know they've been living beside something rotten, pretending it was just the wind that stank. Henry shoved the man into the back of the stable, locked the door, and propped a chair against it. June wiped the sweat from her face with a dirty handkerchief, her jaw clenched tight. "You believe him?" she asked. "I believe he believes it," Henry said. They sat down against the stable wall, the day bleeding into dusk. Neither spoke for a long time. They were exhausted in the way people only got when grief and survival ran side by side. When dusk turned fully into night, June spoke again, softer this time. He said it's a network, bigger than Corvin, bigger than him. Henry nodded. "Which means Pa's death. Silas's too. They weren't just the end of something. They were the start." A horse neighed behind them. A lantern flared to life near the church on the hill. The priest stepped out and lit the steps with slow, methodical motion, then turned and vanished again. June stood. "We need to know who else is part of this. Word spreads. We can't do that with just a name and a bleeding man." Henry looked up at her. "Then we start asking questions." They returned to the saloon, where the other men still lay, some dead, some unconscious. One of the surviving raiders stirred, groaning. June crouched beside him. "You're going to want to start talking," she said. He blinked blearily. "I don't." She pressed her knife to his side. "I ain't got the patience for lying." "They don't tell us names," he said, coughing. "Not real ones. Just signs, routes. You get orders. You do them. They move people. Sometimes it's livestock. Sometimes it's guns. Sometimes it's people." June's face twitched. "Children. Families. Sometimes folks who owe debts. Sometimes just folks in the way." Henry leaned in. "Where do they go?" "There's a place. West of here. Near the salt flats. Folks call it the crossing. We're not supposed to say the name. They say if you do, it finds you." "What is it?" June asked. "A hub. For everything. Deals, trades. You pay to get in. And to get out. Corvin wasn't even top of the ladder. Just a middleman. This whole thing, it's been growing for years. You think taking him down changes anything? You just lit a fire under a hornet's nest. Henry stood. Then we burned the nest too. They rode out at first light. Left the town behind, its people still watching from behind curtains and cracks in the wall. June didn't say goodbye. Neither did Henry. There was nothing to say. 3 days west, and the desert changed. The dry, cracked land gave way to pale salt flats, blistering beneath the sun. Nothing moved except the wind, and even that seemed cautious. They rode in silence, rationing water and sleep. On the fourth night, they made camp near a rusted sign with no words, just the carving of a broken scale, nearly worn away. June stared at it long into the dark. "This place," she murmured. "It's where Pa sent letters from." Before he disappeared the first time, Henry didn't answer. He was thinking of Elias. "Do you think he made it back to town?" Henry asked. June shrugged. "If he did, he probably hates us for not following. He doesn't hate us. He should." The fire crackled low. Coyotes howled in the far distance. June stirred the embers with a stick. "You ever wonder," she said, "if we're just becoming the thing we're chasing?" Henry looked at her. "You think we've gone too far?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. By morning, the sun was already fierce, glaring off the salt in blinding sheets. They followed the ridgeline that curved like a bent spine until they saw it. A compound tucked into the land, camouflaged in beige and white. Watchtowers, walls, a single gate. The crossing. It looked like a prison. Or worse, a fortress. "We can't go in blind," Henry said. June nodded. "We don't. We get someone out." They waited until nightfall. 2 riders approached the gates. Guards checked something, papers, gold, maybe a name, and waved them through. "Did you see that?" Henry asked. Left guard used a coin. Scratched the face. "That's the pass." They ambushed the next lone rider on the trail. A woman with silver hair and a scar down her lip. She fought hard, but not well. When they stripped her, they found a coin around her neck. Inside the crossing, everything changed. It wasn't just trade, it was power. Makeshift buildings bustled with people exchanging everything from rifles to velvet. There were auctions in the open air, booths with masks, men in fine suits, and children in rags. And everywhere, the mark, the broken scale. June and Henry moved through the crowd, silent, watching. It was too big for them to understand all at once. But one thing was clear. They were in the belly of something foul, and something that wasn't afraid to feed. A man approached them near the center, dressed in white with a snake-shaped pin on his chest. "First time here?" he asked. Henry nodded. "Looking to trade." "With who?" "Whoever's buying." The man smirked. "Try the south tents. That's where most new faces make their mark." He walked off. June grabbed Henry's arm. "He clocked us." "I know." They reached the south tent. Inside, a girl, maybe 12, was being led toward a cage. June snapped. She lunged, knife in hand, cutting down the first guard before the others could shout. Henry fired once, twice, clearing the exit. People screamed. Chaos rippled through the crowd. "Run!" June shouted to the girl, who bolted into the dark. Sirens blared. Real ones. Loud, mechanical. The gates slammed shut behind them. The crossing began to transform. Tents folding into bunkers, guards suiting up in rows. They were trapped. "We have to move," Henry yelled, dragging June behind a stone barrier as bullets cracked past their heads. A voice boomed from a speaker somewhere above. "Outsiders, you've violated sacred ground. You've drawn blood where none was owed." June spat into the dust. "That child wasn't yours to sell." The voice ignored her. "Lay down your arms. Submit, and you will be judged with mercy." "Mercy," Henry said. "They don't know what that word means." From the corner of the compound, someone ran. "Fast, familiar." "Elias?" June whispered. It was him. Blood on his face, dirt caked across his shirt. He charged straight toward the barrier, sliding into cover with a gasp. "Thought you might need me," he said between pants. Henry stared at him, stunned. "How did you didn't go back?" Elias said. Followed you. I was angry, but I'm not stupid. I couldn't let you do this alone. June hugged him so hard he winced. You idiot. He grinned through the bruises. I missed you too. The ground shook. Something heavy was rolling their way. A cart. No, an armored wagon, rumbling toward them like a tank. Henry checked his bullets. We're not getting out through the front. June looked up. Then we go through the middle. You want to take the heart of the crossing. I want to rip it out. They moved together. 3 kids born of fire and loss, shaped by grief and grit. They ducked through alleys, avoided spotlights, climbed walls, slipped knives into backs when they had to. The compound roared behind them, a hornet's nest fully awake. And at the center, another saloon. Always a saloon. But this one was wide and sprawling, built with stone, guarded with steel. Inside, they found her. A woman in black. No name. Nobody. Just a ledger, a smile, and eyes that had seen too much. I've been expecting you, she said. The doors slammed shut behind them with the finality of a noose tightening. June froze mid-step. Henry's hand drifted toward his revolver. Elias, still breathing hard from the run, shifted his weight like he expected the floor to open beneath him. The woman in black didn't flinch. She didn't reach for a weapon. She just looked at them the way a snake looks at something it's already swallowed. You come a long way, she said. Her voice was quiet, low like smoke curling under a door, and loud. The crossing doesn't like loud. Henry's jaw twitched. Who are you? The woman smiled faintly. The ledger keeper. That's all you need to know. You run this place? June asked. I keep track of who owes what, she said, and who's come to collect debts that aren't theirs. June stepped forward, knife still gripped low. Then tell me, whose debt were we supposed to watch our father die for? Huh? Whose name's in that book that says Silas needed to bleed out in the dirt while we begged a ghost for help? The woman tilted her head. Silas Wren. That's a name with pages and pages behind it. She reached slowly into a drawer and pulled out a thick leather-bound book, its pages frayed and stained. When she opened it, dust curled off like old secrets. She flipped through without looking, hands practiced, until she stopped near the middle. Silas Wren. 5 years ago, he gave shelter to 3 runaways. Children. Didn't know who they belonged to, but he didn't ask. Those children were property of the crossing. Dead owed. Bodies promised. And when he took them in, he stole from us. Henry's voice was a growl. You're calling those kids property? The woman met his eyes. This is a place of deals. Of contracts. That's all. People trade what they value least to protect what they love most. Sometimes that's gold. Sometimes it's land. Sometimes it's kin. Don't you dare talk about love, June snapped. You sell people like they're sacks of grain. Don't we all? The woman said. Every town out there turned a blind eye to something. You think you're better because you're louder? You kill for what you think is right. I keep records. That's the only difference. Elias stepped forward. So who do you answer to? A small pause. The woman closed the book. I don't answer. I remember. And when the time comes, I remind people what they owe. Outside, the sirens had stopped. The air grew thicker, heavier. The saloon felt suddenly like a sealed tomb. June looked around. So, is this where you plan to bury us? In your house of debts? No, the woman said. This is where you choose. You can leave. Right now. I'll even let you take 1 child with you. No persut, no retaliation. 1 clean slate. But just 1. June froze. What? One of you walks away free. 2 stay behind. The crossing needs balance. You're insane, Henry said. I'm order, she replied. And I offer what the world outside won't. Choice. Elias stared at her. Then at June. Then at Henry. We don't split, he said. Not again. Then you all stay, the woman said. June's fist shook. We're not here to make deals. We're here to end them. The woman gave a long, slow nod. So be it. The lights went out. A second later, bullets tore through the saloon walls. June hit the floor first, dragging Elias down with her. Henry returned fire through the shattered windows, ducking low. The whole place lit up like a war zone. She called reinforcements. Elias shouted over the noise. June crawled toward the back door, slashing a path with her blade. We got to get out of here. We can't fight the whole compound. Henry followed, covering their retreat. The woman in black was gone, vanished like a whisper into the smoke. Behind them, the saloon began to burn, the fire licking its way up the velvet curtains and cracked beams. They made it out the back and sprinted toward the outer tents. The chaos they'd started was still rippling. People running, yelling, trying to gather goods or get to safety. The fires cast everything in orange and red. "We can't just run," Elias said. "This place, there's still kids here. People who won't make it out." "I know," June said, "but we need help. We need backup." Henry pointed toward the far ridge. "Then we sent a message." They made for the radio tower at the edge of the compound. Tall, skeletal, and half-rusted, it loomed like a scarecrow watching over the deals made in dirt and blood. They climbed fast, dodging fire from below. June reached the control box first, fingers flying over dials and switches. "Who are you calling?" Elias asked. "Everyone who owes us," she said. "Sheriffs, ranchers, drifters with a conscience. I don't care. I'm making sure the world knows what this place is." Static hissed. Then a faint signal caught. June leaned into the mic. "This is June Wren. If you're hearing this, you've heard the rumors. I'm here to tell you they're true. The crossing is real. It buys people. It breaks families. And it kills anyone who speaks up. But we're still standing. And we need you. We need everyone." Henry grabbed the mic next. "They're not invincible. We've cracked them open. But they'll seal it back if we don't act fast. Don't come for us. Come for what's right. Come for the ones still inside." They sent the message and blew the transmitter after. No way to track them now. No way to trace the call. By the time they descended, reinforcements had arrived from the wrong side. More guards. Bigger guns. Dogs. They fought through it all. Every step deeper into the compound, they took out another arm of the beast. Cages unlocked. Ledgers burned. Tunnels collapsed. June found a boy no older than 9 behind a barred cell, and she carried him out herself. They freed 24 children that night. Maybe more. The number didn't matter. The scream of sirens did. They gathered in the chapel near the center, a stone building that had once been a sanctuary and now served as a vault. Inside, they found a vault door, and behind it the real records. Ledgers stretching back 20 years. Names. Trades. Everything. June lit a match. Let them try to rebuild without history. She tossed it in. The flames caught instantly. Footsteps approached from outside. Dozens, maybe more. They were surrounded again. Only this time, they didn't plan to run. Elias looked at them both. "If we go down here, we won't," June said. Henry loaded his last rounds. "And if we do, they won't forget it." The chapel doors burst open. Figures poured in. But then, gunshots from outside. A horn. A cry. More people arrived. Not guards. Not buyers. Farmers. Ranchers. Riders from distant towns. The call had worked. The compound split like a dam breaking, floodwaters pouring in. Screams. Chaos. Hope. June led the charge. By the time dawn broke, the crossing was nothing but smoke, fire, and footprints. Its keepers fled. Its slaves were free. June stood at the gates, looking back. Henry beside her. Elias leaning on a post, exhausted. "You think this is really the end?" Elias asked. "No," June said, "but it's the start of something better." Behind them, children stepped out into the sunlight. Wide-eyed, blinking, free, and somewhere, far beyond the salt flats, a new debt ledger began to form. Not of debts owed, but of wrongs to be made right. The smoke took days to clear. Fires smoldered long after the fighting stopped, and even when the air no longer stung the lungs, the scent of burning paper and blood hung low, thick as the memories they'd never shake. The crossing, once hidden like rot beneath a floorboard, had been dragged into daylight, and like all things that thrived in darkness, it withered fast under the sun. Its leaders vanished. Some were hunted. Some were spared by the mercy of confused crowds. But none escaped the reckoning of their names being known. June stood at the edge of the ruins, hands blackened with soot, cheeks still streaked with a child's blood she hadn't managed to wash off. She hadn't spoken much since the last fight, since the final gunshots silenced what was left of the place. Henry sat not far from her, his coat torn, arm bandaged, boots cracked open at the toe. He didn't complain. Just kept carving something into the dirt with the end of a burnt stick, some pattern he didn't seem aware he was making. A loop, then a line, then a loop again. The shape of something that never closed. Elias was down in the chapel ruins, helping the older children gather the last of what could be salvaged. Blankets, unspoiled food, shoes still good enough to wear. Most of the kids they'd freed had already been taken in by the families who answered June's call. Some rode in on horseback and left with 3 or 4 kids packed into their wagons. Others simply opened their homes and waited. A few, the hardest ones, the ones who didn't speak, didn't flinch, just stared like carved stone, remained behind. Those were the ones June couldn't stop thinking about, because those were the ones who reminded her of herself. Of them. A few paces away, the 3 siblings, if that was what they were now, stood around a wooden post that had once held a bell. It had collapsed during the fire, but Henry had righted it again. Elias had scrawled Ren into the side. Nothing else. No dates. No scripture. Just a name that didn't belong to the place, carved in as if to rewrite its history. June had nodded once and said nothing. She looked up now, eyes scanning the horizon. Riders still came every few hours. Some were strangers, drawn by word of mouth or by vengeance or curiosity. Some were bounty hunters chasing the names that fled. Some were preachers. Most left quickly when they realized this place wasn't looking for sermons or silver. A few stayed. A tall man from Dakota with a missing eye and a heart too soft for his own good helped set up makeshift beds in what was left of the stables. A young woman with a scar across her lips taught the kids how to cook over open flame. A pair of brothers, no older than June and Henry, started building a fence around the perimeter, not to keep people in, but to keep threats out. Nobody said they were forming a town. Nobody dared speak that word. It was too clean, too full of promise. But something was rising in the ashes. You gonna say something? Henry asked quietly. June blinked. I've been saying things for weeks. No, he said. I mean about staying. Her jaw worked. She looked down at her hands. The blood was dry now. She could scrub it off. She just hadn't. I don't know, she admitted. Feels wrong to just stop. Like we ain't finished. Maybe we ain't, Elias said, walking up beside them with a sack slung over his shoulder. But we started something. That's how to count for something. Behind them, the children were laughing. Real laughter. Not the hollow kind she remembered hearing back in Salt Creek or Echo Pass. Not the rehearsed chuckles meant to make adults feel better. But real from the gut joy. It made June's chest ache. What'll we do with them? She asked softly. Henry looked back. Te ash untold. Elias nodded. And maybe teach him to shoot. June gave a dry chuckle. You sure about that? No, Elias said. But you remember what we were like before we knew how. They stood there in silence, watching the smoke rise into a sky that didn't seem as heavy anymore. A cart rolled in from the west, an old man driving, a teenage girl beside him. Both of them looked ragged and road-worn. June stepped forward without thinking, reaching for the rifle slung at her back, but stopped when she saw the white flag tied to the cart's front rail. It was a bedsheet badly torn, but it meant something. The girl hopped off the cart and ran straight to the chapel steps where a younger boy waited. He bolted from his seat and flung himself into her arms. The old man stayed back, nodded once at June, and said, He's yours now. You raised him when no one else would. Least I can do is give thanks. June opened her mouth, but couldn't speak. The words stuck somewhere deep and unreachable. So she just nodded back. Later that night, they held a fire. Not for warmth. They didn't need it, but for memory. For the ones who didn't make it out. Silas's name was spoken first. June didn't cry. She thought she might, but the tears never came. Maybe they dried out of her. Maybe there just wasn't anything left to lose. Others spoke names she didn't recognize. Daughters, sons, mothers, brothers. Some they buried. Some they never found. When it was Henry's turn, he stood quiet for a long time. Then he said, I don't know what kind of men we would have been if none of this happened. I don't know if I'd be a good man. I still don't. But I know this. When they needed us, we stood up. That counts. Elias said nothing. Just added another log to the fire. June stepped forward last. She looked around at all the eyes on her. Young, old, bruised, broken, hopeful. Some still healing. Some never would. I don't believe in endings, she said. Not anymore. Just reckonings. This place was never meant to be a place. It was a debt. But now it's something else. So if you're staying, stay with your hands open. Help who you can. Fix what you break. And never, ever turn your back on the next knock at your door. She stepped back. The wind caught her hair. The fire flared, then calmed. The stars came out thick that night. Elias swore he saw a comet. Henry said it was just a flare from a wagon far off. June didn't say what she thought it was. In the morning, the three of them rode out for a while. Not to leave, just to ride. They crested the hills, wind in their faces, dust rising behind them. June looked back once at the chapel, the fire pit, the new fence line, at the children waving from the barn roof, at the crossing, reborn. She whispered something to herself then. Just one word. Home. And for the first time in her life, it felt like it might be true.